Hi, Sam. Welcome to Awaken and Align.
Hello, thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So, Sam is my friend. We hang out and we spent a lot of time together last fall during Scorpio season in Tulum, Mexico. She was such a big part of my life, and we spent a lot of time together because of the panorama and also our shared love of the ocean and Reiki and spirituality. And a lot of our conversations were also about sex. So I'm just so excited that you're here and that you're sharing your knowledge with all of us. Do you mind giving us a little origin story so that people get to know you a little bit better?
Yeah, absolutely. The origin story is an interesting journey, but to shorten it, I've worked in PR for many years now. I started in fashion PR, and again, long story short, I was looking for a PR job. I really needed money. I cold applied to an available position that just said media specialist, which is what I do. And I got on the phone with this man, and he told me that it was for a sex toy company. And I was like, what the hell is going on? Uh, but I asked a lot of questions. He had a lot of great answers. And this was deep into the Trump administration, too. And I just felt this very intense inner knowing and calling that I needed to say yes to this opportunity. So I did. I had never been in the industry before, but I dove in head first. I started listening to all the podcasts, reading all the books, and next thing I knew, I was doing global PR communications strategies for sex toy companies very successfully. So within the past 4 years, I've learned a lot about sex, specifically a lot about female sexuality and destigmatizing sexuality. I've had the opportunity to work with some of the leading experts in sexuality too, and I've learned so much from them. So I'm excited to talk more about this subject.
One thing that I wanted to point people to is actually you did share one of your, I guess, New York City manifestation stories in a previous episode on this podcast. It was a compilation episode where I asked people, what was something that really got you through a hard time and how did you do it and what were some of the things that you said, and you were actually a contributor to that episode, so I'll link that in the show notes. And so if you want to learn about how Sam manifested her dream job and her ticket to New York City, that's a great resource. And it's something that actually really, I think, I don't know if it was a spark in a friendship, but it was definitely a message from the divine when you had shared that story with me, because I was going through such a weird time in my own life where I was feeling really lost. And you had reminded me that if you really want something, you just figure it out along the way. So just to go back to your origin story, what was the feeling like inside of you? Because a lot of people aren't maybe as aware of their intuition that said, yes, I'm going to work for a sex toy company. What was that feeling? What were some of the signs?
Oh, that's such a good question. And a little bit of a hard one to answer because sometimes I think it's hard to put that feeling into words. Um, Not to be too cheesy, but there's that saying, if it's not a fuck yes, it's a fuck no, which I don't actually subscribe to that. But it was a fuck yes, I think is the best way I could describe it. Um, and not in the sense that there weren't things to consider. There were tons of things to consider. I thought about genuinely, would I be able to get another job after this? Which is very unfortunate that that even has to be a thought in my mind. I thought, would potential fashion clients in the future still want to work with me if I was openly talking about sex? I thought about, how am I going to tell my parents this, specifically my dad? That was an uncomfortable conversation. um, so not to say that it was a fuck yes, that I was just like, yeah, let's do this thing. Like, there was a lot of things to consider, and I was nervous and scared. But when I slowed down, and I think that's a key that maybe people that are just beginning with learning their intuition to learn, is you have to slow down to hear it. You have to sit in silence sometimes, sit in the uncomfortable feelings. And when I did that, it just felt very clear. It felt really clear that for whatever reason, and I didn't know it at the time, I just had to say yes, that this was for some reason going to be a part of a bigger picture for me. And here we are. It definitely was.
Yeah, it was a calling. And I
Yeah.
do have to ask, because you've shared with me that your parents, at least your mom, was pretty open about this topic with you growing up. Um, where were you in terms of your understanding of your own sexuality at that time when you accepted this job?
Ooh, that's a good question too.
I mean,
Putting me on the spot.
I'm sorry. These are genuine questions I want to know, and I don't think I've ever asked you.
No. Oh, that's such a good question. Oh man. Where was I in my sexuality at that time? I think more so than, well, I guess they go hand in hand. I was at that moment in time, I feel like stepping into my power more than I ever had before. And in all honesty, a lot of that inner fire in me was lit when Trump was elected. And this was 2 to 3 years in. I don't know the exact time, but the fire was lit when he was elected, and then it was just burning in there for a while. I was getting angrier and angrier.
It's still burning.
It's still burning. Like, quite literally, I have like acid in my stomach burning sometimes from the stress. um so I would actually say I didn't have a full consciousness around my own sexuality, but it goes back again to an inner knowing. I just had this fire inside of me that was raging against what was happening in our country and in our political climate, and the way that women and a lot of other people were being spoken about. Um, and actually, as I started the job, like I said, I started listening to podcasts and things like that. I specifically started listening to this podcast called How Come. It's amazing. And there were a few episodes where on my commute to the office, I would just cry on the train, because they were talking about topics that I didn't have a full conscious awareness of, how certain things were impacting me. Like, there was one podcast episode about Catholicism and the shame-based teaching there, and shame-based teaching around sexuality. And I was sobbing. And if you're a New Yorker, you know, like the cry on the train is always a good one.
Yes.
It's embarrassing, but it's always a good one.
And it's also normal to see that on the subway.
Yeah, it really is. It's so weird, but sometimes it's the best place to just let out a good cry. um, and along the way of doing this work, I started becoming more in tune with my sexuality, comfortable with my sexuality, uh, and more aware of some sexual shame that even still today lives inside of me.
So it was like an awakening moment when you accepted that job, and at the same time, I don't even want to say his name, but you know who we're talking about, the orange guy, the orange Cheeto got elected.
Yeah. Yes.
We talked about him a lot last year because here in the US, we were celebrating during the election, which was not that, I feel like that was so long ago, but it wasn't even a year ago that happened. And so much has changed in our collective, and I'm sure like you have changed and I have changed as well. What parts of your sexuality are you reclaiming at this moment?
Ooh, that's a good one too. Oh, at this moment, it's interesting. What I'm finding at this moment in time with a new president who is not perfect, like, let's be real, but much better. And having a vaccine, which again, the panorama is not over by any means either, but things are getting better and things are feeling safer for me in my personal experience. And what I'm finding in this moment is as things are feeling safer, my body, my energy, my psyche is like, okay, now it's time to process all of the shit. Like, so a lot of stuff is coming up for me in this moment in time. And what's interesting is a lot of it actually is around my sexuality and sexual experiences in life, some experiences that have felt not very good that I'm processing through. And it's always interesting to sit with those feelings too. And with having been in the sex positive industry for 4 years, when this stuff started coming up, I was like, what is happening? Like, I thought this shit was out of my body. But a lot of the things in our society, a lot of the very unfortunate things that happen to women, sometimes it's a journey. Sometimes it comes back and it's not linear.
Yeah. It's so interesting when Sam and I get together because, well, first of all, our conversations are so like wide varying and so rich in its diversity. Like one minute we could be talking about masturbation, the next minute we're talking about like tarot cards, and next minute we're talking about politics and being more inclusive to LGBTQIA plus. And you've really taught me so much about so many things. And my background is, well, besides my more regular, normal, traditional background of, finance in New York City and having that life, of studying Reiki and Kundalini yoga and more spiritual systems, along with my Christian faith that I grew up with, that I kind of cherry picked what I liked and what I didn't like. And then your background with actual studies and data of your understanding, but also real data. What is that like these days? Yeah. Research, looking up facts. And we just saw like a lot of intersections going on about how spiritual people and these institutions saw sex and had that shame-based reality around it, and even how the new age is treating it, to be quite frank. But I want to get into so many of the things that you've taught me, and some of this actually you shared in one of the workshops we led together, which was amazing. First of all, I feel like words are really important. Can you please define like sexuality and sex for us?
Oh man, that's a big ask. I can try.
It's
And
not just, we're not talking about just the physical action. I just want to put that out there.
yeah, absolutely. That's not what it is at all. And just in general, I think that in my experience, sometimes we want to talk about sex and have it be fun and playful and funny, and I'm all for that 1,000,000%. I think sex should be fun, but sex also can be the moments in our life that bring us the greatest joy, and they can also be the moments in life that bring us the greatest pain. And I think it's important when we have conversations around sex to acknowledge that and to honor that and to honor and hold space that there could be wounds there, and not just come on and be like, this sex toy changed my life and it's the best thing in the world and I love sex, and there's a lot to it. And I hope I do the work I do so that hopefully one day we can be at that point, but I just don't think we're there yet. And that was my disclaimer. I just wanted to always honor the joy and the pain that could potentially be there. And you'll find many different definitions of sexuality and sex, and my own personal definition isn't everybody else's, but mine. Sex is, it's any act of consensual pleasure. That can be sex with yourself, masturbating, uh, that can be dry humping with your clothes on, if that's what you define it as. It can be any type of act of engaging your erogenous zones, which your erogenous zones are also not just genitals, nipples, necks, backs. There's a lot of different areas that can provide pleasure. And I think that we have to redefine sex from penis and vagina penetration, because that is not the sex that a lot of people are having. That is not the sex that a lot of people like to have. And even heterosexual couples, most women don't reach orgasm from penetration alone either. So when we think of sex, we usually think of like penis and vagina, but sex to me is just consensually enjoying pleasure with fun and joy and communication.
And I think what you just said is so important for all of the people to hear, is that most women, I would say all of the people that I know who have female body parts, do not climax with penetration. Yeah. It's very external stimulation. So let's put that out there. We're all being very open.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. There are statistics about that, which I don't have in my brain on hand, but there is data also stating that the majority of women, that's not the main point of reaching climax. It's usually external stimulation. And then there's also the discussion of what kind of external stimulation do you like? And I think that's the fun part of broadening the definition of sex, because when you broaden it, all of these doors open up to explore different things, different types of touching, different types of oral pleasure, different types of whatever it is that you're into.
And also, having sex is not just for the man's pleasure.
Yeah.
And that's why these movies and media are, I would say, 95% of the directors and people who work on these films and in media are usually cisgender men who show imagery that is in their favor, but that's not in our favor.
Right. Yeah, it's not.
And it's also heterosexual sex. It doesn't include like the different types of relationships that are more inclusive.
Yeah, exactly. And so many of the times it's just like that jackrabbit motion, and the woman is like moaning and arching her back in these like bizarre ways. It's not real life. It's so annoying. But that's what we've been fed. It's everywhere. It's in shows, movies, music, all of the things. Never mind certain religious beliefs, and not to knock religious beliefs, but I just personally don't believe there should be shame based in faith. But then a lot of women are left feeling confused in their sexual lives because that's all we see. And then women are having these moments where they're in this experience of jackrabbit sex, and they're like, this doesn't feel good. What is going on? Like, I don't want to be moaning and arching my back. Like, this feels like shit.
But again, because women were programmed to please the man, like I'm generalizing, obviously, yeah. But then the woman won't say anything, right? She won't communicate her desires and what feels right and what doesn't feel right.
Yeah. Well, we're not taught to communicate about that. Mm-hmm. We're not even taught to experience pleasure at all as women, typically. And that goes back to even school age and sex education not being so much. Sex education is based in shame and celibacy instead of being based in facts. Even talking about anatomy, the clitoris is not even discussed in sex education. That is just a part of our body. Why aren't we taught that that's a part of our body that exists? It's very frustrating. And I think there's also sometimes there's a safety, there can be safety concerns too for some women to fully express themselves.
Yeah. Something that I shared with you was that when I was in teacher training for Kundalini Yoga, and I learned in India, which they have a different viewpoint of all of this topic. And the first thing that we were taught was how to harness our sexual energy to not necessarily, I don't want to say the word waste because it's not a waste, but harness it to create something in your life. Use it as like an amplifier versus just, like with men, how they masturbate all the time. Like they could store up that energy to create something, specifically with men. But for women, we have that power all the time because we have the capacity to create a human life form. And I think the reason why, like so many religions in the past, specifically Catholicism and schools, because it's patriarchal, right, don't teach this, is because inherently our sexual energy is our power. And when we can fully step into that power is when we are powerful. And they don't want that, because how many women would truly step into her prowess and almost like we could take over the world, right? And I think there's like an inherent fear in that. So I keep thinking about like almost like critical race theory. Like, why would they not want to teach this? This is so important. It's a part of our bodies. And also, I'm not a parent, but why aren't parents teaching their kids their parts? Like, there wasn't a question in there, just Fascinating thoughts that I've had. And because I was fortunate enough to have parents who really talked about this very openly and said the words penis and vagina. And my mom taught us like how it all worked at a very young age. So it was never like taboo or secret or something that I had to hide. And I was actually very fortunate enough to go to a middle school where they did teach us more like the anatomy and biology of it versus like pleasuring and that kind of stuff. And they did give us resources to like Planned Parenthood and stuff like that. But I know a lot of people don't have those two things working in their favor.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people don't have that. And a lot of people really don't have anything working in their favor. Their school isn't teaching them, their parents aren't teaching them. And it's a hard, I'm not a parent either. I'm not gonna pretend like I know what that's like, but I can imagine it is an uncomfortable conversation to have. But at the end of the day, it does keep children safe to know what their body parts are, to not use like this weird, sorry to call it weird, but this like language that's not actual anatomy. Children should know vagina, penis. Those are not bad words. And when we can't use the words, children can think that it is a bad word. Because otherwise, why aren't we saying it? Why is it so hidden? I was able to work with this incredible woman. She previously was the U.S. Surgeon General during the Clinton administration, Dr. Joycelyn Elders. I worked with her with a client of mine, and we did some media opportunities with her, and she left so many beautiful, amazing marks on my soul that I will hold forever. And one of the things that she believes in so strongly is that masturbation should be taught in school. And she actually mentioned that at a UN conference and was fired because of it. But I had the opportunity to speak with her a few times and hear directly her thoughts about this. And at the end of the day, it's really about safety. If children, young adults don't know the names of their body parts, if they don't know, if they don't even know what sex is, how are they going to know if something happens that is inappropriate? They won't even have the language to express that.
Yeah. Actually, Oprah has a new book. I forget the name of the book, but it talks about her previous experiences with trauma when she was a young girl. And what you're speaking about is her experience where she was raised by her grandmother and she was never taught the word. She was never taught about sex. And when she was, when those horrible things was happening to her at a young age, when she was sexually assaulted as a young girl, she didn't even know it was bad because she never knew what it was until much, much later. So I think what you're saying is when you can empower, maybe empower is not a good word, but when you can give the information to even children about masturbation, about sex, it helps actually prevent a lot of these things from happening. Yes, I think that it's important to be trauma informed in any space that you hold in general, especially when it comes to topics like this, when not everybody has had the same experience.
Right.
And actually, one of the points that you made during our time in Tulum was kind of like we could go on another podcast, hold down this topic of the new age spiritual community. And you're seeing now all of these like tantric retreats and awaken your kundalini and connect to your feminine, I'm sorry, I'm laughing, goddess energy within. What are your thoughts on all of that?
We could have like 5 episodes about my thoughts about that. First, I mean, I think on the surface, it seems great. You know, we want more people talking about sex. We want more folks feeling empowered, or whatever the word is, to go on a retreat, to talk about sex in a group setting, to lean into the power of their sexuality. All of that I am a full supporter of. I think the challenge is when we go deeper into some of these people that are hosting these workshops and these retreats are, I mean, a lot of issues. Accessibility is one of them, around the whole topic in general, and that's another topic. But they are, and you touched on this a little bit earlier too, when you really go into it and you hear and you really listen to what they're saying, a lot of these spirituality folks, not all, but some, are saying like, there's an energy exchange when you have sex with someone, and you have to protect your energy, and you have to be so mindful of sharing that energy with another person. And again, if you really think about that and take that a little bit deeper, that's rooted in shame. That's a little bit of slut shaming and telling you, you know, if you want to go have sex with multiple people, if you are comfortable and want to consensually enjoy a one-night stand, that like your energy has been exchanged and you need all of this protection. Like, I'm sorry, but what the fuck? It's just a hot mess, in my opinion. And those are, I think, if we want to be sex positive and invite people to invoke their sexual power, we should invite them to evoke it in whatever way they choose to. If they want to engage in sexual experiences with other people or not, both of those options are totally fine.
Yeah. Yeah, and
that topic gets me heated. Sorry.
Sam is a Reiki practitioner, so she knows what she's talking about. Yeah, I've seen on Instagram and on TikTok these I don't even know what you call them, influencers who are selling like protection baths to cleanse your yoni and get rid of your ex's energy. At the end of the day, it's like, also, maybe it's not as extreme, but we are human beings as well. And we all, okay, if you want to call it a mistake, fine. You had a one-night stand with somebody. It doesn't mean that your energy is tainted. I think you cleanse your energy and then you move on, right?
Yeah. And it also doesn't even have to be a mistake. Maybe you had a really great time. And that's it. And that's the end of the story. I just think it's just getting very shame-based very quickly. I did some research many years ago, and Cosmo did this incredible series about sex and about sex ed. And they interviewed the teens in school and talked to them about how they were experiencing sex ed. And there was this crazy story that a lot of people have experienced. And it was that the teacher in school asked the first student to chew a piece of gum and then take the gum out of their mouth and hand it to somebody else and ask them if they wanted to chew that piece of gum. Obviously, the person was like, no, I don't want to chew that piece of gum. And then the teacher relayed that piece of gum that was chewed to a woman's vagina after having sex with somebody.
Oh.
And there's many iterations of this that happen in school. Some teachers have done it with like roses and picking the petals off. with putting gum or Jolly Ranchers into a bag, and then all of the sucked candy is like mixed together, and they're like, this is what happens when you have many sexual partners. And although these quote unquote spiritual retreats are, it's not as obvious of a tie as that, I do feel like they're going in that direction. And I think that direction is super dangerous.
Meanwhile, when a man has many, many different partners, he's like Casanova, you know,
Right.
and a bachelor. I feel like this is all about patriarchy as well. Let's just be honest.
Isn't everything?
I think at this point, it's like that's my awakening, is that that's the root of all of it, and capitalism. But thank you for sharing that. And we want to talk now about the power of masturbation. Yay!
Yay!
So I love masturbating. I feel like I'm not like sharing anything new that I haven't already said on here on this podcast or without my family already knows. For you personally, and with your studies and your research, what is the benefit? What are the benefits and the power of masturbation?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many benefits. Masturbation can even be used as a tool to heal trauma. And to give a little caveat there, some people that do experience a lot of sexual shame for various reasons actually can find masturbating at first hard, and they can maybe experience some shame after. So always work with a mental health counselor or a sexual therapist if that's happening, because those can be really, really intense feelings. For other people, including myself, masturbation has been a part of the sexual awakening and the power. And there's so much good about it. I love this topic. I mean, at the end of the day, if you learn how to please your own self, you can tell somebody else. Like, how amazing is that? It seems like such a simple concept, but especially women are not taught that. We're often taught that masturbation is dirty. There's a lot of really icky, shameful language around it for women. But our bodies are built for pleasure. Some women can have back to back to back to back to back orgasms. Like, what a crazy gift that is.
I was just gonna say our clitoris is like a button to the cosmos.
Yeah. Seriously. It is. I really think it is. And our bodies are made, that part of our body, the clitoris, is literally just for pleasure. There's no other purpose for that. Our body was made to experience pleasure. And that is such a gift. It's such a beautiful gift. And I think masturbation can help a lot of people experience that feeling that this is a gift. Our body was made for this. We were just taught differently. We were taught lies. We were taught lies about a lot of shit, but we were also taught lies about this. And what I always say is, also, if you don't know your own pleasure, and this is a bit of a generalization, but I did work with a client on some data around this as well, is that if you're not experiencing pleasure, if you don't know how to give yourself pleasure, if you don't know how to ask for pleasure, a lot of the times you're also not asking for a raise at work. You're not asking for boundaries with your friends and with your family. You're not using your voice and using your power, because at the end of the day, like we're saying, our pleasure is the source of our power. And when you tap into that and you feel it, you're just like, I can conquer the world. Like,
Yeah.
I can do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just a really beautiful tool. And then also, or having an orgasm releases a chemical called oxytocin for women, and that chemical can also be released through long hugs. So if it's safe, you can do like a 20-second hug and get a little oxytocin boost. But it's a chemical that makes us feel really happy, really alive. There's data that shows that it can alleviate headaches, stress, it can help you sleep better. So you can masturbate if you have a migraine, you can masturbate if you have period cramps, you can masturbate if you're stressed out and get this natural boost of oxytocin. That makes you feel good, that makes you feel powerful and centered and grounded. And I think there's so many amazing tools. And I'm going on, I'm going to stop in a second, but if once you continue on the journey of masturbating, of knowing your body, of finding the right toys and tools that work for you, what can come after that is also manifesting while you're masturbating, which I think is like the coolest thing in the world and so powerful.
Mm-hmm. And it's fun.
It's so fun.
For me, it's part of like self-care.
It is. It is. And I wish that was more accepted instead of like the bubble bath and the sheet mask. I mean, that's a whole nother episode too. But
if you're watching, I mean, if you're listening on the podcast, I just made eyes at Sam because I'm an Aries, and my idea of self-care is masturbation, not necessarily face masks.
Yeah, it's mine too. I have a little piece of paper over here. I'm not going to get it because I'd be rummaging through my things, but it's my self-care and mental health toolkit. Mm-hmm. And on the top of the list is masturbating. Mm-hmm. Masturbating, drinking a lot of water, taking deep breaths, tapping, talking to a friend. It's sometimes is a bath, sometimes, but it's not always this, again, like capitalistic version of like lounging with these bubbles and this face mask and a glass of wine. Sometimes that doesn't do shit.
Yeah. And if you think about what it is, it's you're releasing energy. So I always feel like lighter and free.
Yeah. It's also literally the chemicals releasing in your brain too. Mm-hmm. You do feel lighter, you feel relaxed, your muscles loosen up. I think one of the best ideas is to masturbate before having to make a big decision. Mm-hmm. And then don't make the decision immediately after because you're a little bit high on that oxytocin. But
yes, I'll do everything.
But masturbate to calm down, to get in a really good space. So then you're not coming at like a decision or a problem from a place of fear. Mm-hmm. Also, if you are at the point where you really enjoy masturbating, masturbate before or after your therapy sessions as a way to calm and release your nervous system. I think it's such a beautiful form of self-care and also self-love too. Mm-hmm. Like if you think about how much you have to love yourself to give yourself that gift of pleasure, mm-hmm. It's such a beautiful experience, especially as women when we've been taught that pleasure can only come from a man. Mm-hmm. And then it usually doesn't, not always, but a lot of the times it doesn't come from that man because they also haven't been taught the tools that they need to communicate and emote and all of the things. And I think it's just a way of being able to give ourselves everything. I really think we can give ourselves every single thing that we need, including sexual pleasure. Like masturbate, go buy yourself a bouquet of flowers or some jewelry. You don't need to wait for somebody else to do those things for you.
Yeah, and it's like every spiritual teacher that I've ever like heard say is like, you have to fill your own cup first. Like you have to give to yourself first, so that then it sets a precedence for other people to match that with which you give to yourself. So how do you expect anybody to give you that amount of pleasure if you don't know how to do that for yourself?
I had this woman I worked with in my early 20s. And she was a little bit older than me, and I was going off to college. I was working like in the city I was from, and about to go off to college. And she was like, she was like, you know how before you buy a car, you test drive it? And she was like, you better test drive all those cars in college. Enjoy them all, ride them all, go fast, go slow.
Oh my God.
And it was amazing. And I mean, I think that's also perfectly acceptable. And you can learn that way. You can learn with one person, and you can learn with multiple people.
Yes.
And you can learn with yourself.
Which is, okay, you reminded me, a part of the thing that I wasn't remembering was that a lot of like our old paradigm, right, which we are trying to disrupt, is having your first sexual experience, like being the virgin, was tied to marriage. And it was like you held that on for your special person. And I feel like I'm, at least my age bracket, I'm coming from an age where a lot of my friends and family did that. They held out for their person. And I'm wondering, like, you know, I'm an elder millennial, and a lot of my age group are sleeping, air quotes sleeping, like they haven't awakened to themselves. They haven't awakened to their sexual energy because they've never given themselves the permission to explore something outside of the old paradigm and the old system of marriage. I mean, marriage is an institution that was basically trading like a dowry for property.
Yeah.
If we're really gonna like bring it back to like historical context, I know this is not a romantic view of marriage, but it's an old institution based on religion and the patriarchy. So I'm just like wondering, like, how many, you know, 40-year-old women are out there in the suburbs. And this was like the basis of that Netflix show Sex Life, of how many women are out there being like, what the fuck is my life?
Yeah.
Maybe they've never been railed against a wall or had like interesting sexual experiences. And I also think that this goes to also, and we've just spoken about this recently, like gender fluidity and your preferences. I really don't think sexuality is black and white. I don't think it's like as like defined as we think it is.
Oh yeah. No, it's not. It's not. Yeah, that's that's a whole other topic, but gender is completely fluid, and gender is also, I mean, the concept of gender, not our biology, the concept is made up. It's made up. So there's a lot of constructs, there's a lot of things that we've been taught that aren't true. And I think it's not only giving like these potential people that haven't tapped into their sexuality or their new experiences. I don't know that it's about giving it's definitely at some point you have to give yourself permission. You have to write yourself the permission slip, but sometimes it's helpful for somebody else to talk about it first, which I think is part of our intention of doing this and putting ourselves out here with a topic that isn't always easy, is because sometimes you just need to hear somebody else say the words to realize you're not alone. and to give yourself the strength and the courage to give yourself the permission slip to say whatever it is that you need or whatever it is that isn't fulfilling. And I think shame plays a huge role in a lot of this. And shame is, I've personally been learning a lot about the experience of shame recently. Brene Brown talks about it, and I've been reading some of her work recently too. I think shame is a really scary emotion and it keeps us silent. And I think the silence sometimes feels so hard to break through. So that these women in the suburbs that maybe aren't feeling sexually fulfilled, like, I don't know, it's something I think about all the time. How do we reach them and help provide the permission slip? And also break down the shame that's been taught through society, through religion, through all of this shit.
Yeah. Well, if you're out there, start masturbating.
Please.
Well, oh, sorry, continue.
I was just going to say, along the lines of masturbating, toys are so helpful, and toys can be intimidating for a lot of people, but also using your hands can also be intimidating for a lot of people, especially for women who've been taught it's quote unquote dirty or bad to touch yourself. To actually touch yourself with your own hands can feel really not great. And toys are a great way to help with that. So there's some amazing toys out there, and that's fun too. You can decide and figure out, do you like suction toys? Do you like rumbling vibrations? Do you like fast pulse vibrations? The opportunities are endless.
And with technology, they keep getting better.
Yeah. We love that.
Something that you mentioned, sorry, I got off on a tangent there. I'm also very passionate about this topic because I truly believe that when we can all own our sexual energy and our sexuality and our pleasure, we become more empowered individuals. But one thing that you mentioned, which we love talking about here, and we've actually co-led a workshop together, was manifesting while masturbating. Because it's basically what you're doing is you're harnessing your energy, channeling it through all of your energy channels, and allowing yourself to vision and be in that mindset with all of those good feeling hormones. It's also chemical. So can you walk us through your process, if you don't mind us asking?
Oh man.
You have like a vision board right in front of your bed.
I might keep it a little bit more general than my specific process, but what people can do is, I mean, there's a lot of different ways. There's, I think maybe one of the simplest ways is while you're masturbating. And I think this is easier, in my opinion, to do with toys, like really powerful toys, because there's certain toys that just like get you there, and that's different for every person what that is. But once you find that toy that just gets you there, I would recommend using that toy while manifesting, because sometimes like visualizing like your dream job or your dream partner or whatever is not the sexiest thing to do and might not like get you revved up.
Also, you need like a steady like pace.
Yeah.
Steady vibration. Let's put it that way.
The good steady vibration. So once you have that vibration going, I think one of the first steps that people can do is just thinking about something I was saying earlier too, like thinking about how powerful your body is, and just focusing on that, focusing on your worth, saying, I'm worthy of this pleasure. I'm worthy of this pleasure. I'm worthy of this pleasure. my body was made for this. What a gift that is. I'm so powerful to be able to experience this pleasure. I think that alone is manifesting bigger and better things, even though it's not this very specific visualization, which we talk about in manifesting being specific, which is important, but just harnessing and being super in tune with that power and telling yourself how powerful you are, I think just opens up so much, like different channels energetically. And then if you want to take it further, you can close your eyes once you have the good vibration going and picture it. Visualize what it is that you're working on manifesting in those moments, and see it while you're experiencing this like intense pleasure. And I promise you, you will feel like you can conquer the world after. It's a very cool experience to have.
Yeah, I like that. I like that as a affirmations practice too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I am powerful, I am deserving of this pleasure.
Absolutely.
Really beautiful. Is there anything else that you wanted to share that we missed?
I think we covered a lot. I think that's it. I also have to pee so bad.
Okay. Well, Sam is so like knowledgeable on this at a spiritual and energetic level as well. But I will link all of her information in the show notes and you can reach out to her, check her website out. But thank you so much, Sam. This was so fun.
Thank you. It was fun. Maybe we can do it again.
We will, for sure.
Yes.